I started astronomy, studying astronomy when I was 11 years old because, well, I don't believe in coincidences, but somehow in this cosmic synchronicity of the universe, I happened to be in the only middle school in France with a planetarium. And somehow, I was 11 years old, I had no idea where I was going with that. But I was already fascinated. By the age of 13, I was already teaching astronomy and mythology to adults, even in local scientific conferences. And I was loving it. I think I already truly became captivated by the moon in 1991, so I was 12 years old, already studying and very much into astronomy. Because at that moment, in 1991, there was one of the longest solar eclipses in history, total eclipse of the sun, which was in Mexico and which lasted for more than 6 minutes, which is a lot of time. For example, the one that entered the United States through Oregon in 2017 was roughly 2 minutes in terms of the totality of the eclipse. By age 14, I studied at the observatory. I did training there in Nice, which is one of the most renowned observatories in Europe. And actually, I was the first pupil to actually go there for this training at that time, where we had to choose a place or type of industries, and of course I went to the stars. I was meant to become an astrophysicist, and then basically I said, oh no, my God, I'm not going to study 10 years more, like to end up in a lab or in an observatory, which is, don't get me wrong, a beautiful job to be an astrophysicist and stuff, but it wasn't my path. I actually wanted to escape the conventional system already, but like in a smart way. In one of my videos about 2D and 3D perception and reality, I put the link below. I was kind of mentioning at some point that I met people along my way in my travels in many different cultures who, while watching the sky, the heavens, and contemplating and conversing with these beautiful people, which I met along the way at some point, I realized that many of them didn't know that the moon was actually moving in the sky. I mean, you know, most of the time, again, we just don't care. We just don't care in this world. We don't care about the sky, about the moon, about people. Even when we say, you know, like, how are you? We don't really expect an answer. It's just very robotic, automatic, zombie-like attitude. But anyway, yeah, we just see the moon. Maybe we care like once every couple of weeks, and we see the moon. It's like one phase, one place, but we don't understand nothing, and we don't care. And that's okay. Again, I don't judge anyone, but it's a fact. Two of the most beautiful things I can share are astronomy and astrology, because they're intimately correlated in the sense and spirit. So today, we're going to talk about the moon, obviously, and we're going to talk about the background of the moon, go back to the basics, and also talk about many other things, like the phases, how it evolves in the sky. Sorry, I'm going to talk in kilometers in these videos, but I'm sure you can make the conversion somehow. So the moon has a diameter of about 3,474 kilometers, which is about a quarter of the Earth, which is, I say about because it's, depending on the source, is like a few kilometers away. So the Earth diameter is about 12,756 kilometers by the equator, and about 12,714 kilometers from pole to pole. Well, you know about the idea that we have this centrifugal force that kind of flattens the Earth. No, I'm definitely not a flat Earth believer. Sorry about that. I mean, at least in this physical dimension. And maybe we can extrapolate, extend the debate at some point. So because of this centrifugal force, it flattens the Earth by the poles. And because you know that the Earth rotates around its axis at about 1,500 kilometers per hour, which we don't feel. And it's interesting to perceive this aspect also as a global 3D perspective of how we're flowing, we're orbiting the sun through the cosmos, and how the sun is kind of orbiting the center of the Milky Way, the galaxy, all together in this cosmic dance. We know that the moon is about on average at about 384,000 kilometers from the Earth. And we know that the orbit of the moon around the Earth is elliptical. So at its closest point, it's about 55,000 kilometers from the Earth, and this is called the perigee, the closest point from the Earth. And at the most about 405,000 kilometers from the Earth, which is called the apogee. So it fluctuates depending on the cycles. And this is also why we have this phenomenon of supermoon and micromoons. Supermoon, I'm sure you've heard about that. It's like the moon is bigger. It's kind of bigger. I mean, we talk of about 30% difference about the size and also the magnitude, how it shines. We can see this difference especially during solar eclipses. So when the eclipse happens, when the moon is at or close or at its perigee, the closest point from the Earth, well, it's bigger. It's a supermoon. So it takes more space in the sky, according to our perception. So that's when we have a total eclipse of the sun. And then depending on the distance, it can be 1 minute, it can be 6 minutes, it depends. And when it's the micromoon close to the apogee or the furthest point from the Earth, so the moon is smaller, and usually you have annular eclipses. That's when the moon goes in front of the sun, but it cannot really cover the whole surface. So you have this ring of fire. So now the question is, knowing that we have two main cycles of the moon that we take into consideration, which are the sidereal cycle, which lasts for about 27.3 days on average, which is the orbit of the moon around the Earth. And then we have the synodic cycle, which lasts for 29.5 days on average, and which is the whole cycle, yes, around the Earth, but actually from phase to phase. So let's say, for example, from a new moon to the next one, to the following one. So why don't we have an eclipse every synodic cycle? Okay, because we know that, well, basically when we have a solar eclipse, this is when we have a new moon. So why during each new moon cycle we don't have a solar eclipse? Well, this is because, again, if we try to understand the 3D perspective of what's going on here, if we take the plane of the solar system, so you imagine like everything, all the planets are orbiting the sun. Well, whether in circle or ellipses, it doesn't really matter. For the perspective, you take sideways, you take the plane of the solar system with the sun in the middle. So basically, all the planets, they go in this horizontal plane. And everything is almost aligned, not exactly, but let's say almost, compared to the moon, which has a tilt in its orbit compared to the plane of the solar system. And this tilt is about 5.15 degrees. So this is actually why we don't have an eclipse every month, because most of the time the moon goes slightly to the right, to the left, on the side of the sun, but it doesn't really come past or in front of the sun to create and generate this beautiful phenomenon, which is a solar eclipse, and which I witnessed twice actually, even if I had to wait 26 years. And it's just magical. We talk about it in another video probably, but especially regarding the feeling of it, but there's so much meaningfulness to it. And at that very point, when we connect energetically, emotionally with the moon, regardless of our respective beliefs, during the totality, which is a completely different story and feeling compared to even 95% of the process. This feeling at that very moment, you can just kneel and cry really and worship like all ancient civilizations were doing somehow in their wisdom and knowledge. So as I've talked about in some other videos, it's super important to reconnect with the moon and understand, perceive, integrate how it moves, and also what it means and how we feel about it, and all these feminine, divine, our deepest emotions, our creativity through the process, and how we disconnect with that and how we need to reconnect with this process. The moon was very important, fundamental in all ancient civilizations in different points of time and space. And like everything in this society is totally perverted. Well, basically our connection with the moon and the feminine divine has been perverted too, with all a bunch of tremendous consequences regarding this process. For example, we've talked about also like the importance of the moon calendar in Eastern philosophies. I like to say philosophies instead of religions. I like the philosophy more than the maybe perverted practice as well. In the Mesopotamian culture, for example, the moon was a god. It was called Sin, which is called also Nana in the Sumerian mythology. In the Egyptian mythology, the moon was the god Thoth. And I'm sure you've heard of Thoth before, like there are lots of the Sumerian tablets and beautiful, captivating stories about this god, which probably came from a more ancient form of advanced civilization somehow, regardless of what mainstream history is pretending. In the Greco-Roman mythology, it was the goddess Selene, which we talk also at some point regarding its connection with astrology and what it means. Or Lunar in the Roman mythology, the equivalent of Selene. And then we come to the bright side and the dark side of the moon. And the bright side is, for example, Selene. How we shine and how we connect to the role in this life and beyond, where we can shine our connection with other people. And we have Lilith, which is all about the darkness. But there is no judgment again here. There is no negative connotation. We all have a darkness we should embrace, integrate at some point. We're going to talk about the face of the moon And we'll explore more in some other videos, if you like the idea. What we're going to try to do throughout all these videos and this channel is like to perceive things in all possible angles. And starting with the basics, again, in kind of 3D, or 4 if we include the time in this process. So you imagine like the moon orbiting the Earth. And depending on where is the moon around the Earth, according to the sun, we're going to have a specific phase, okay, aspect of the moon. So the easiest way to understand that is like during a new moon, as we've talked about, it's close to the sun. That's why we don't see it. Or the only way to see it is, again, if there is a solar eclipse. Or during full moon, because it's opposite. That's why it's full. Well, again, it sounds obvious, but we take it for granted that it's like that. But like we don't really click our brain to say, okay, see it from some kind of absolute observer perspective. We have 2 main phases, or cycles, or sub-cycles in the process. So as a reminder, we're going to talk about the synodic cycle. So these 29.5 days on average from phase to phase, okay, the phase cycle. So for example, from new moon to new moon, it works for every phase. But we're going to start with new moon. And there are also some connections with where is the moon, in what zodiac sign, in what element. But again, we'll expand this topic later. So the first phase is the new moon. It's the beginning of a new cycle. And usually the energy is quite low, calm, soft, sweet. It's a moment where we set new intentions for the cycle. For my part, I love doing ceremonies or connecting with nature and writing down my intentions. I really recommend you to journal your processes to take down, because to write down your feelings, especially depending on the phases and whatever. Journaling is a beautiful tool in life. It's like a therapy. I've done it for years when traveling around the world. It was often the only entity, my journals, with which I could share something profound, my crazy stories. So yeah, it's important. But I believe it's a beautiful process for everyone. And it helps materialize and manifest on this physical plane our intentions, because it's already written down on paper. It already belongs to this physical plane, beyond the energy process of it. Then we go to the two main phases, I was saying, basically, because the first half of the cycle, so roughly 15 days, all the way from new moon to full moon, which usually happens after about 15 days of the cycle. It's called waxing. And then it's waning, it's going down. So imagine like the moon, the cycle, as a flow of energy. Okay, it starts kind of low. Low doesn't mean bad, okay? We have the right to feel a bit tired and low. It's part of the process. Sometimes we have more energy, sometimes we have less energy, but it's not important as long as we have the right tools for ourselves and not our neighbor or for society that suit us, for us to be happy and complete in everything we do and to flow with the moment, regardless of how we feel. And everything is okay. So when the moon is waxing, so crescent, we get to the first quarter after about 8 days. And then the gibbous phase, when it's between a quarter and full. You imagine like the energy is going up. Okay, the peak intensity of the cycle is the full moon. So when it grows, when it waxes somehow, we can also indulge in more, little by little, to indulge in more physical exercise, to put more intensity and volume in our sessions. And regardless of our intentions, we get to the full moon, and that's the peak of intensity, but that's the celebration time. Because meanwhile, as a short-term cycle, you can understand that we have shorter terms and longer-term cycles, okay? Like in the Mayan calendar, and they all go together. We have to understand how to perceive like in the singularity of the present moment, but also as time and space expanded in this reality somehow, regardless of our beliefs, to which we belong, in one way or the other. So full moon is celebration time of our intentions, of the manifestation of our intentions. So of course, again, as we talk about intentions, we talk about pure, honest, authentic intentions, because then we all delusional to ourselves. And sometimes we put intention maybe from an ego-oriented perspective or money-oriented perspective. I talk about stuff at some point, for example, ask yourself the question, if money didn't exist, what would I do? What are my passions? If we want to reconnect with the moon, we have to be a little honest with ourselves in the sense that what do I really want for myself? To be happy and complete. Not to do like other people, but like to do as what I feel right, regardless of how other people are going to judge me. Because at the end of the day, this is a mirror of how I judge myself. Then we go down from the full moon all the way to the next new moon. So the energy is going down. But it doesn't mean we just stop doing stuff. Again, we adapt, we explore, we experiment things. So then we can feel what suits us and what doesn't. And there are no mistakes in life, there are just lessons. So sometimes, yes, we try something and it doesn't feel right for us, and that's okay. We accept it, we are honest with ourselves, and we move on, we try something else. Of course, it's super important at some point being honest with ourselves to step back and say, okay, I come from a conventional life as well, guys, okay? Don't get me wrong, I don't come out of the blue. Again, my parents didn't have money, no one took my hand. They weren't vegan people or travelers. I've done everything by myself, and yes, I've been judged a lot all the way to this point of sharing these stories with you. And it hasn't been easy, and yet I wouldn't change anything because I feel happy and complete right now. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I really believe in that, and we should all come to this point of, okay, does this life suit me? Am I happy? Am I complete? What should I do? And yes, we all have the choice again. So reconnecting with the moon little by little is going to kind of expand this feeling and assist us in not only reconnecting with the moon, but our deepest emotions, our purpose on this physical plane. And that's a beautiful tool that we can all have, even though, yes, of course, it's much harder to do that in a city. So yes, we have to be honest with ourselves. The energy goes down all the way to the next new moon, setting new intentions, usually connected with the elements of the signs where the moon is in each moment. And we keep going, and we keep growing and thriving in longer term cycles. Thank you so much for watching this video today. I feel grateful to have you. I hope you appreciate the content. If you get to this point of the video, maybe you do, there is something. And I hope we can keep exploring, sharing more about all these fascinating topics. If you can take a little time, would be very appreciated by liking, commenting. You can engage in conversations, whatever you want. Tell me some related topics we can present and debate together. Meanwhile, and until next time, I send you lots of love, lots of light. I really wish you to be happy and complete in everything you do. Namaste.